There was excitement of the minister, and I think excitement and the team dealt with a lot of logistics for that. But going straight into this panel, I know it's a very topical topic, much controversial topic, gig economy. Everybody has views on it. I and I think when we planned for the panel, we didn't know it will be so topical on this day. But I would say I mean, as we were discussing what to bring out, we thought let's not get into, the binaries or the polarities of the gig economy. We know the gig economy is here, it's here to stay, it is scaling up. So let's discuss what's working, where is it fragile, what are really the learnings from the founders and different stakeholders in the space, and in order for it to become a sustainable, dependable source of employment as well as profitability for the different companies. What are the things we can actually design now at an ecosystem level to take it forward. So I know all the panelists have really been introduced. I would just ask them to take 2 minutes each to share a little bit about, how they define gig, what aspect of the gig economy does their company look at, and really, as they've dived into this space, something counterintuitive about the gig sector that has come to the fore. If you can share that. I mean, I would just, before I hand it over to you, Videt, maybe we'll start there. I would just say, I think I was reading somewhere like gig is not a job role or a job category. It's really a form of labor architecture. So I do think, this group actually has different parts of the labor architecture that they're looking at. So over to you, Videt.
No, thank you, Geeta, and thank you everyone for having me here. Before I start, a very quick question: how many of you create content in any form, anywhere? Like, can you just put your hands up?
Wow.
Okay. The reason I asked this question is that one of the most non-obvious places where gig work is exploding is content creation. In fact, just a quick intro: Airblack helps people launch their livelihoods by training them in a skill where they can launch a business. So, for instance, we are India's largest beauty academy. We are also one of the largest culinary academies in the country. Very recently, in the last 1 year, we've also upskilled schools in content creation, in tailoring, and so on and so forth. So you can come in, spend 2 to 6 months, and go from zero to launching a business. So every single year, we're helping close to 50, 60,000 people launch a livelihood and go from zero to their first income. And one of the fastest growing gigs on the platform is actually content creation. We are at this moment sitting right now, training close to 60 to 70,000 content creators every single month, right? And the reason I say this because when we think of a gig, the most obvious images that come out are platform gigs, right? Which particularly comprise like probably 10-20% of the overall gig economy. But the moment you start thinking about gig as a whole, there is platform gig, which is low skill to medium skill. So platforms like Zomato, Blinkit, to Urban Company, to high skill, for instance, where acts like consulting, video creation, to various other forms of freelancing start coming in. And then there is traditional work, which is also becoming very gig first. Like, for instance, we see people launching cloud kitchens, and they would open a cloud kitchen for 6 months, and then they will not work on that cloud kitchen for the rest of the 6 months, right? So for us, the biggest learning, Geeta, has been on the gig front is that we are not saying that gig work is one form of work, it is the future. We are slowly moving from, one form of formal economy where work was defined, predictable, to more and more people becoming a part of the gig force where they're working from home, from their cities, doing flexible work. For some of them, it's the primary source of income. For some of them, it's a secondary source of income. And for some of them, it's the only work possible, right? So happy to engage in the conversation further and hand over the mic to Anshul.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anshul. Like you know, I'm the founder of Entitled. We build access to financial and health services for gig and urban low-income workers. On the financial services side, everything around credit, savings, etc. And then on the health services side, primary care, preventive care, insurance, medical financing, and the lot. And the intent is to continue to expand what workers have access to. It could be commerce, consumption tomorrow as well. So the intent is to have a platform where they can benefit of everything that they want to access around their lives. Gig for us is typical platform workers that you would see around, unskilled largely. All of you that interact with the gig workers every day. That's sort of what gig is for us. And something counterintuitive to me, very interesting, is that 77% of gig workers do it as their primary source of income, right? While from a distance it might seem like they're inmates, 20% of them leave and then they do other jobs. Some of them come in for 6 months and leave, but 77% actually depend on it full time, and it is their primary source of income. And more than 1/3 of them spend more than 14 hours a day, right? 1/3 of them. Right, so that's, I mean, especially the first bit was really counterintuitive when you look at the entire segment, and happy to talk about it a little bit more as we go along. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Madhav. I run a startup called Vahan. We are building an AI recruiter for India's blue-collar workforce. We work primarily in the food delivery QCOM space. We now recruit upwards of 50,000 people every month for companies such as Zomato, Swiggy, Blinkit, Rapido, Uber, Zepto, etc., all these companies. This is a space that obviously is growing incredibly fast. In fact, it's grown by about 5x in the last 2 years. It's expected to double again this year. Projected CAGR over the next 4 years odd is about 45 to 50%. There are close to, I think now about 5 lakh people hired every month in the overall delivery segment. I think over 6 to 7 million workers total. So it's a very, very important part of the Indian economy now. And when I think about growth in this space, there really is, I would say, growth at 3 levels. Obviously, companies are able to hire a large, flexible workforce, which is able to scale up and scale down basis needs. There is growth for workers. So in most gig jobs, content creation perhaps, but let's say in delivery, which is perhaps the most familiar format that we are all aware of and close to, the barrier to entry is very, very low. You don't even need a bike these days. You can just rent an EV or a Yulu, right, and get started. And people can earn upwards of 25 to 30,000 rupees. People who work 14 hours a day probably make 35,000 rupees a month. So it's a very, very good source of income. And of course, for the economy, the Indian economy, it's helping more and more people enter the workforce. And it is, in fact, now the #1 sector for job growth in India. So it is, as Geeta said, I think, here to stay. One counterintuitive thing, and you stole the one that I was going to mention, but another thing that I've learned in this space, and we worked in this space for a few years, is that obviously churn in this space is very high. About 1/3 of gig workers leave the gig that they're in every month, right? So within 3 to 4 months, everybody is gone, let's say. But the #1 reason that they leave is not because of lack of income. It's actually lack of predictable income, right? So I speak to a lot of these delivery workers fairly regularly. And almost on a daily basis, they have to guess what they're going to earn today, right? So that's how much unpredictability exists in their lives. And of course, most of them come from a low-income background, which exacerbates the problem for them. So that's one insight that I wanted to share.
Yeah, no, we will come back to the issue of churn and the other things. And before I hand over to you, Rakesh, one thing I was just thinking, yes, I mean, the gig economy is today estimated to be 7 to 8 million workers, expected to grow to 25, 30 by 2030. We expect 1 in 4 employees to have some form of a gig connection by 2030. But I think as platforms, other areas which are employing gig workers, as they grow, it's also interesting to see that other stakeholders are coming up in the ecosystem. I think, we have 2 of you right here. Because in the absence of these stakeholders and the ecosystem growing almost at a pace similar to the growth of the sector, I think a lot of cracks will begin to appear. And I know, Rakesh, you get a holistic view of the sector. So yes, why don't you share more?
Thank you, Geeta. My name is Rakesh. I'm part of Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. Our objective is to build pathways for the urban population through our interventions in education, jobs and livelihood, and financial services. As Geeta mentioned, jobs and livelihood is an important element of our work, and I'm fortunate to share the stage with one of our partners, Airblack, where we are investors, and sitting on my right is my mentor, Geeta Goel. So anyways, on the gig worker, as we say, I think the other panelists have already mentioned about how critical it is from the Indian economy perspective as well as from the job employment perspective or employment generation perspective. But to my mind, I think we should not be seeing it as the panacea for all the unemployment challenges that the country is currently grappling with. We at the foundation, of course, put a lot of onus on upskilling of the workers also, because we believe that, yes, gig economy is going to be an integral part of the economy. It's going to create a large number of employment opportunities. But at the same time, in order to have a sustainable income also, some part of the workers need to be upskilled, where a lot of efforts is being made by the foundation. This is where we are at the foundation.
I also realized Entitled has a relationship with IIMA Ventures. Yes, perfect. And of course, the foundation also has a strong relationship with IIMA Ventures. And, sorry, do either of you have? Oh, then you'll get less talking time. But anyway. Okay, so I mean, moving on to the next question, and maybe I'll ask just a couple of you to chip in so that we get more and more questions addressed. I do think the gig worker economy is a contradictory phenomena. On the one hand, people like the flexibility, so they engage with gig. On the other hand, they like consistency of income, and therefore they churn from gig. There is a lot of transparency. I mean, you can actually see where your Uber driver is, where your Swiggy delivery boy is. But really how the orders get allocated to different delivery partners, there is limited transparency of that, or also how your Uber search pricing works. I think there's a lot of talk on that. So, I mean, being a strong participant in the gig economy, I mean, any thoughts or views from you on how you blend these two contradictions, because they almost come hand in hand, so where it works, where it doesn't. Maybe you talked about this, Anshul, so maybe we begin with you, and, sorry.
Right. So, funnily enough, maybe not funny for the driver. I was driving to the airport in the morning, and the moment I sat in the cab, he started talking about how the platforms are so big, and he went on about it the entire time. And he said, he showed me his phone. He said the drive to me is showing 10 kilometers and 400 odd rupees. And the moment he clicks on Google Maps, the drive is actually 16 kilometers. So he's like, I accepted it because it's 10 and the money that I'm getting, but it actually ended up being 16 and no one's really paying me for it. Right? Classic example of how, opaqueness or lack of transparency there is. And I would think it's by design in some ways, because it gives platforms more control, greater margins, etc. as well. But I think it's going to move to a direction where things will start to change. The last 2-3 years, there have been a lot of platforms and a lot of focus on subscription-based, plans or platforms that have come about, particularly talking about the fact that this is a fixed amount of money that we charge, and therefore no commissions, and you will have clarity on what you're getting essentially. And that is the direction it'll go in. And in some ways, when gig started in India, it needed to go through that cycle where it grew to a certain extent and then stabilized. And I think now the entire stabilization bit is going to come about. There's been focus on it from the government side, the labor codes, but also state-specific policies that talk about the fact that there needs to be more transparency. And I would think that the next phase will actually be about platforms flexing it in some ways and saying that I am more transparent than the other, and that is why you should come to me and not to the other. I think it's getting to that stage where that will need to happen. But I would agree that there is a fair bit of opaqueness that exists at this point today when it comes to payout calculation, base pay, what are you making, why you're making a certain amount of money. There are issues with accounts being cancelled for drivers, etc. And all of that will need to go to one place, and some organization will need to happen at that point.
So, is there lack of transparency and opaqueness? Yes. But is it because of a malicious intent? I think the jury is still not out as far as I would believe. This is largely, if I'll characterize the opaqueness on the platforms or the, I think there are certain areas where the service provider needs to build in that opaqueness or lack of transparency. This what we can call it as their proprietary work, which could be their algos, demand matching algos that they run behind the scene and all. As far as the price transparency is concerned, I think that is where there need to be complete transparency to the driver. As Anshul was mentioning in the morning, he didn't have an idea how many kilometers he's driving for that 400 rupees ride and all. Some of the areas where if people say these are exploitative, I think the properties prevailing in the industry, then I would say probably on the surge pricing share, the commission that goes to the deactivation reasons and all that driver, rider, or anyone has to undergo because of the reasons, that there has to be higher level of, I think, transparency built in. So putting it straight that it's completely opaque and exploitative, I think there I have a disconnect, and I think the jury is still not out on that aspect.
Matter of like where the industry is in its growth phase. I think everybody goes through an evolution phase. The industry has grown faster than many people expected. But I think increasingly, at least from long-term investors and some of the founders, I am hearing the view that as soon as you start seeing your gig workers as long-term customers rather than an expendable source of supply, you start, taking decisions and make them much more responsible for the long run. So yes, I think I think in the world of impact investing, we always used to call it patient investing, make it responsible investing. So I am also quite bullish that over a period of time, we will find our normal. But the other aspect is also the churn, right? I mean, today, the companies benefit because it's flexible. I think the gig workers sometimes want flexibility, sometimes want more predictability, so they churn. And the churn has two costs. One, for the gig workers, because today they don't have a system of transferring their credits and benefits, etc. And then for the company in terms of its own, training, and onboarding costs. It seems to me, so correct me, that today, because the companies are in such a high growth phase, many of the equations on unit economics, etc., are banking on the fact that this will stabilize. But I think if they continue to have this churn, maybe the economics don't work out. But I don't know, I mean, I think, Madhav, it will be good to hear your views on, just the churn and its two sides. How do you see it from the vantage point of a strong ecosystem player, which is it's in your interest that higher churn happens. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, churn is it's a very, very complex issue. If you try to unpeel the onion and try to understand exactly why it happens, you probably end up more confused than enlightened. But if I were to offer these two perspectives here, from the perspective of the worker, it's very interesting. We found that while there isn't full transparency in the system, there is a decent amount of transparency. The challenge is that the rules are very complex. So rules around what they might make if they work a certain number of hours a day or do a certain number of trips, or rules around what they need to do to keep their accounts active, etc., are very, very complex and very dynamic. They keep changing as well, right, based on the needs of the market. And as a result, and you'll have to understand, these people are obviously coming from a low education background. Comprehensibility is very, very low. One of the experiments that, in fact, we ran fairly successfully at Vahan is we tried to really simplify earnings for them in their first few days on the job. By the way, just a stat, so about 30% gig workers churn on average every month, but in the first month, about 50% churn. And of those 50%, about 80% churn in the first 3 days. Right? And the number one reason why they churn is because they don't know how to make money during that time. So what we try to do is we try to develop a do X, get Y model. So if you do X deliveries today and every day or whatever, right, you can make Y amount of money. And that helped us bump up retention to a large extent, right? But there is no silver bullet in this space. So that's been one key learning for us, that the rules are there and they are told to people through training videos and other formats that are not effective. But if they are simplified, right, they can become a lot more effective and help the workers actually be successful on the platform. From the perspective of the gig platform, it's very interesting. We found that, in fact, we've heard from some of them, that the cost of retention is actually higher than the cost of bringing in a new resource. And so economically, and from a business perspective, it just doesn't make sense to try to retain a gig worker. Right? And again, if we go into why that's the case, then we'll be here for many hours. But even today, in most markets, though there are parts of certain markets where that is turning out to be false, where in fact there aren't any more people left to do delivery. So I live in Bangalore. In Bangalore, there's a place called Kormangla, and there's a place called 5th Block in Kormangla, which is sort of the high street. Demand always outpaces supply there. Demand being demand for orders and supply being delivery workers. And so there are pockets like this in various cities in India now where you just are not able to hire enough people to meet demand. Right? So companies are starting to shift very slowly in their positions and trying to now look at retention. But even now as a whole, and just from a pure economics perspective, retention is more expensive than hiring.
You look at the complete other spectrum of, I mean, I don't think you need to deal with churn. You need more and more people coming onto your platform with it. But just your views on growth of the gig workers and development, because I mean, the other criticism one hears is there are no career pathways for gig workers. Your response to that?
I think, when we talk about predictability, one is predictability of income. And the second is, okay, how do I grow? Like, what is my next step? So for example, in certain gigs, like, for example, a delivery rider, you can be an excellent delivery rider for 2 years, but you'll still be a delivery rider. And that's something that maybe the system solves in some way in the future, and we're still in emerging economy there. But in some other forms of gigs, like the ones that I deal with, for instance, we help women in tier 2, tier 3 cities launch their home salons. So close to 2,000 women every year, they train and they launch their own home salons, right? There is a natural progression. Like, for example, you'll start probably as a beautician initially, or someone who's interested in makeup, to then probably working at a parlor, to starting your own parlor from home as a 1-seater parlor, to then probably going to a 3-seater, to multiple franchisees. And I think the way I think about this is that there are certain sectors or certain places where the career pathway exists because it's a traditional field, like for example, culinary, and there is something new happening. Like for example, the phenomena of doing a beautician service online is new, but the sector as a whole is mature. So I think it's a matter of time. In fact, this entire debate recently will lead to some of the career pathways becoming more obvious with companies trying to drive retention. Right, today, cost of retention is very high. All the more reason because people want to see progress, right? People want to just not earn for money. they also earn because they want to gain respect in the society. There are only two reasons why people do work in India. And as I have seen in tier 2, tier 3 cities, respect is far more important than money at some point. Like I know folks who are happy earning 15, 20,000 rupees of supplemental income every single month. But the fact that, hey, you know what, I'm just not a homemaker, I am an entrepreneur, that entire aspiration outweighs everything else. And I think that's true for the entire workforce as a whole. Once you start realizing that you can earn income, that self-confidence or that respect rises, and then you're seeking more respect. So I think the way to think about this is that in the future, as some of these newer sectors also mature, we'll see progress pathways emerging, and it will be more system-led to drive retention. That's the only way to sort of think about a long-term career path in a career like this, right?
And again, I think we just blame the gig sector and no career pathways, but I go back that gig is not a job role. I mean, certain job roles, have limited career pathways, and certain job roles have more. And to the extent we've gigified job roles that have limited career pathways, we go with it. But Rakesh, your views on that?
Yeah. So I think Geeta Videt brought out a very interesting point. I think when we talk about gig works, we should be seeing it informal job opportunities as well as some high skilled job opportunities, as Airblack is trying to do, or what Footwork, which is offering distributed BPO services, are trying to offer. So in certain roles, we will not see the horizontal career progression, like a rider possibly may be working for 3 years and will continue to be a driver on a platform. But what could be done is the credentials that a driver carries over the 3-year journey could be used to kind of create a profile for them, and whenever any platform is trying to woo or solicit a driver, possibly they may be paid better basis on their ratings and all. Secondly, I would see this is an employment generation opportunity where possibly someone makes 10,000, 12,000, which is slightly more than an informal economy worker. When we talk about construction industry or other industry, there wasn't any formalization even in that industry. The reason gig is getting a lot of, I think, voice in the market, or I would say attention, positively or negatively, whatever we want to call it. The reason is because the scale at which it is operating, 7 million workers to, let's say, if it is talked about 20, 25 odd million workers in the next 5 years, the scale at which the opportunities are getting created, then the institutions need to start thinking at scale, and certain framework needs to be built in to bring in that level of, I think, transparency as well as some resilience. So just to cite an example, let's say if someone is on a platform working for 3 years, making even 12,000-15,000 a month over a 3-year journey, a formal profile for that individual is being built, which could be used for sourcing some small micro loans, because as Videt mentioned, I think this is offering a dignified labor employment opportunity to an individual, and in India everybody aspires to be an entrepreneur. Some of them will eventually translate into high skilled jobs and all, but this gig economy will continue to sustain a larger part of the economy in coming terms.
One more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience for their questions. But so I think in the audience we have founders, aspiring founders, as well as some investors. So it will be good to hear from you. I think we have 3 strong entrepreneurs and 1 investor in the panel. Just to, I mean, if you were to give advice to somebody who was setting up a new enterprise around gig, what are the positives that, what is it that they should be looking forward to, why they should enter the space? What are the things to be careful about? And also, sorry, I mean, there are 3 questions in one. And also just one thing that you might have done differently now that you have the hindsight. Yeah, so I mean, the 3 should be different answers so that you give as much advice as possible. So what should you look forward to? What are the things you should be careful of? And you as a founder, if you were to repeat it, what would you do differently? We can start with you, Videt.
I like to believe I'm still learning, so very difficult for me to be in a position to give advice today. But just reflecting, and I'm biased, of course.
Cut the humility there. You did mention you were the largest skilling academy on beauty. I think a lot of us in the room may think of VLCC as the largest. I mean, at least that's the name that comes to mind. I don't know if you've crossed the numbers or about to cross it.
So
Well,
I think in terms of enrollments, yes, but they are definitely a very impactful business, specifically on the skilling side. Um, but I'm biased, of course, to say that, see, when we think about India, our biggest strength as an economy, and also some of the things that, also put a lot of constraint, is people. We are one of the most populous workforces on the planet. And when I started Airblack, one of the things that I thought of is that, okay, I have to be in this country. So what is it that I can do to solve the most important problem? What is that? Where can I create the highest impact? And I still feel the same. So if you're thinking about starting something in this space, any particular venture that helps people make money or help moves them along, like you can think about a company like Urban Company, who has innovated on a gig, right? They created this new gig altogether. Or Misho, for instance, allowed a lot of people to start a business from home. So if you're creating something of value where you can leverage the centerpiece as the people that we have, and you can help them be successful, then there should be no reason that you will not make money on the way, or you will not create impact, right? So my particular advice or fable would be to say that think about models where you can actually empower people at scale, and impact will follow. And if you chase impact, then there is nothing like it, right? Things to watch out for is definitely, I mean, in the last 1 year, I've been thinking about this a lot, is that what would you do to rebuild your business process or mindset if you were to make it AI first? I know you would have heard this a lot, but I think as someone who started off as a computer science student, as an engineer, I mean, it seems like we're all in university all over again. Like even at Airblack or otherwise, I've seen this play out more than anything. That if you have to really watch out for something, think about your business as everything AI first, right? Or most of it AI first, because that's the future. I think there was a third part to your question, Geeta. I think when we started, we focused on marketing a lot, and then along the way, 3-4 years into business, I met I would not name the company, but I met a bootstrap founder in our space who was 10 year into building a beauty academy. That's still one of the top 5 beauty academies in India, and we were exploring a possible merger because we were not going through a good time at that point in time. And I saw their P&L, and I saw that their marketing cost was 10%, or ours was 5 times higher. And he said something very interesting which stuck with me, that if you're really creating opportunities, then आपके घर के आगे line लगनी चाहिए. India is an opportunity deprived country. So I think one thing I'll watch out for is that if you're in the people space, if you're in the opportunity space, then if you're really creating impact, then you don't really need to spend a lot on sales, spend a lot on marketing. If you really create a good solution, good product that is empowering people, line lag jati hai. I think there is definitely a lot of demand for, like, the opportunity ka market size in India is infinite. So if you can really do it well and you can focus on a great product that transforms people's lives, I think lot of opportunity in India. So that's how I will end it.
So let me start by saying that there's no question that it's a fantastic segment to build in, even now in India. It's an asset light model. Everything that you typically look at in a business, the network effects are massive. Could differentiate you. There are moats that you can build around. Once you've gotten to a certain amount of scale. So everything good from a business fundamental perspective. If you want to do something in the gig segment, I think one thing to be slightly careful of now is that the cost is slightly going to increase. There are a lot of externals that will start to come in now with social security and all the changes and all the questions that are happening, access to insurance that needs to be given. So the cost will slightly increase, and the economics and the unit economics question will slightly change as well. So I think that's one thing to be slightly more careful of for anyone starting in the segment in India. I think one thing that we would have probably changed is, if we were doing this again, would probably be that we'd be a lot more communicative with the users. We interact with users day in and day out. Some people have not gotten a loan and they'll be like, मुझे loan नहीं मिला, आप लोग करते हो, document करते हो, फिर देते नहीं हो, 4 दिन हो गया मुझे, मैंने ये नहीं किया. I think if we were more proactive in telling them what hasn't happened and why it hasn't happened and what you could do to get there, and over time build that communication system better, I think we would have been probably a step ahead of sort of where we are today. And we've over the period realized that the community of people and the power in the community, there's a lot, and you start to build it sooner, especially with the segment of people that we're dealing with. There are effects that start to generate from there on. So I think that'll be the one thing that we'd probably do slightly differently.
I was just reminded of somebody saying, like, in gig and actually across all sectors, it's not tech that should scale, but trust that should scale. And I think your point about communication, I mean, that's a great lever for building the trust. I think your point with it about the product being strong enough, again, gives a lot of trust to all the users spending time with the community. So yes, Madhav, you want to?
Yeah, and building on that point, Geeta, I think trust compounds like an asset, or it can even compound like a liability, right? And it's very important to get trust right as soon as possible early in your journey, so that you compound in the right direction. I think that's very, very critical. Um, I think the other learning for us has been that, and now especially because social security benefits, etc., becoming real in this space, gig is starting to formalize, to some extent and become more of a job. I think it's important for founders and investors to think more about potentially building value businesses over volume businesses. India, of course, is a very large country, and the volumes are incredibly attractive and seducing, so to speak. But I think it's important in the labor space to really, really look at businesses that are inch wide but mile deep, where you can extract more value, so that there's enough in the value chain for everybody to be happy. Anything I do differently? So exactly that. So we've been a volume business. We still are a volume business. Last year we got about 4 lakh people recruited. Last month we did about 50,000. And of course the volumes can be even more than that. But we are now starting to look more at value across the value chain, and potentially look at building what people are now calling more of a proprietary labor pool. So Urban Company, in fact, is a great example of a proprietary labor pool-based business, where they've selected a few key categories, gone very deep, and they own the entire experience for the worker and, of course, the consumer, which produces more value overall.
A lot of founder journeys, evaluated, invested in them, and also, have been an investor. So
I think nothing changes if you ask me. All the points the co-panelist mentioned about the product market fit, value or the trust, these are the core elements of setting up any business or scaling them up. Of course, on the gig side, I think the compliance and regulatory cost needs to be built in for the newer founders who are trying to build in something. I have the benefit of being an impact investor, so because of the patient capital, we do not chase returns or have any time to our exit and other aspects. But I guess with the new changes in the overall screening or the evaluation of these investments, the conventional investors would also start building in this different cost into their evaluation, and the new normal would factor in, and the matrices would change accordingly. So I guess this is a new normal for the investment evaluation.
Just a point on the additional social security costs. I mean, yes, the companies would pay for it, but ultimately the users will pay for it. I think a lot of us are recipients of comfort of a Blinkit delivery, Zomato delivery, and not paying for that comfort. So at some stage, much of that can and should get passed on. But on that note, maybe we would invite some questions from the audience. Yes. If you can just briefly introduce yourself, and also if there's a question to a specific panelist.
Perfect. Thank you so much. My name is Shrey. I'm the founder of a company called Jobs UPI. Essentially, all three of you talked about solving the problem of discoverability of all job seekers at the end of the day, be it by creating proprietary labor pools or by actually like line lag jai logi and trust should scale, not the product essentially. So how does one go about it in a very simple way? Like, agar aap ja rahe hain, what does that mean, that SOP strategy that you actually adopted? Either it looked great on paper but not work great on scale, on mass, or something that you realized कि यार आपने double down किया, क्यों किया? How was that thinking? What are the questions you asked yourselves on making that discovery pool? So it's a question for Madhav specifically, and then even the two of you.
That's a good question. Many such things. I'm just trying to pick one to make it relevant for the audience. I think one pattern perhaps across our journey has been that what looks really good on a spreadsheet or in theory often may not work with the audience that we're dealing with. And I'm specifically talking about, let's say, blue collar workers in India. I'll give you one example. Within the delivery space, most platforms in different categories have complementary demand curves. So what that means is that, let's say, food delivery has peaks at breakfast, lunch, dinner. Grocery has peaks before breakfast or after dinner when people order groceries. E-commerce will have its peak, let's say, in the afternoon, after lunch, before dinner. And there's this concept of cross-utilization where you ask a worker to potentially work across these platforms that have complementary peaks so that they can maximize their income. And if you model this on a spreadsheet, the worker can earn more than 50,000 rupees in a month, right? So it looks great. Why not? Why wouldn't anybody do it? But then when you go out to the market and when you try to get workers to work across platforms, they just don't do it. They just don't. And I mean, we try to understand why, because earnings can more than double. And at least our takeaway was that they think of that platform, and Anshul touched on this, as their primary source of income, the platform that they're working on. And for them, it's as good as a job in a way. So they don't want to do multiple jobs potentially in parallel, even though the gig model offers that flexibility.
I think go full stack, like you said, right? If you have to go to a town and build an ecosystem for people to come from there to where you are, I think if you're full stack, you differentiate to begin with, right? Also, I think the communication and what people, the kind of marketing messages that those people might want to hear, they might be very different from where you're sitting and to who you're supplying to, right? So I think it's, if you're cognizant of the fact that I understand and figure out ways to understand that segment, try and build an ecosystem there that can allow you to have a strategic advantage, that'll work really well, right? Because you then have, you build that proprietary pool for yourself, right? Because you went to the effort of going to the tier 3 town to build that ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Videt, we would love to hear your comments also on this, because you do get your students from many different parts of the country. But I mean, the other point I would say is, often people say gig workers are not robots. So yes, what you think in a spreadsheet, or it will not materialize that way, and therefore continuous market testing, messaging, etc., do become very important. But I know, Videt, you do a great job attracting students from, or discovering students from.
See, I think ours is a slightly different proposition because we are training people and then we are helping them become entrepreneurs. What we've done in the last 3-4 years is double down on a specific kind of pool where we really understand the motivation well. Like for instance, for about 2-3 years, we were trying to also train a lot of people who are under 25 for beauty as a segment. And then we realized that when you're under 25, there are hundreds of things you can imagine you can do. Then we doubled down on the segment above 30. And we realized that people have much more clarity कि यार ये घर से करना है. You have to do this from home. Only 3-4 hours in a day that I can give. I cannot do an 8-hour job or a 10-hour gig. And I want to be making like 10, 15,000, 20,000 a month. In fact, my counterintuitive insight to something that Madhav mentioned is that we also know a certain segment, and it's a dominant segment on our platform, who if they earn 15,000 in a month, they don't want to earn more. they don't want to unwind. They're happy for the month. And we talk about predictability. They're like, we'll figure it out next month. So the mentality is very, very different as you start, penetrating various types of pools. We have figured out that the pools that work for us are pools which really want to work from home, for whom the best opportunity is flexible, who probably cannot afford to migrate to a big city. And we've doubled down on that and launched multiple schools and completely built a, two-way successful platform. We are also working now on expanding that pool and defining our product for more and more categories, more and more customer segments. But for this ICP of a learner, for this customer profile, I think we've really understood the motivation well and tried to give them gigs and train them in gigs where they can achieve what they want, right? So
Hi, my name is Alok. I run a management consulting firm called Torrent Advisors. So my question to all of you, in fact, is there's another set of gig worker that's emerging right now, especially the independent consultants or contractors. These are all knowledge workers getting into contributing to the gig economy. And we also have gray collar workers, another emergent area in the gig economy. So from your perspective, how do you see the platform and all the resilience, and they, especially when we're talking about Viksit Bharat 2047, so how are they going to contribute using all the resilience and everything that's being talked about right now? Because I feel they are getting overlooked in all the discussions that are happening incidentally as such. So your thoughts on that?
To take that.
So Alok, I think right now, yes, the focus is more on the when we say gig, it is I would take the liberty of using the word low skill workers at this point of time. The segment of workers that you're talking about in terms of knowledge or skilled workers, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there is any platform which is enabling employment opportunities for them other than the employment portals like the Naukris of the world and Monsters of the world, which we're historically doing. As far as their contribution to the overall Bharat at 2047 would look like, I think they would continue to be contributing the way any knowledge worker is currently contributing in. The reason I think we need to take a step back to understand why this emergence of this group is coming out in the last 8-10 years, especially post-COVID. I think the reason is this is offering a lot of flexibility. I think historically we have seen then that women during a part of their career had to take unforced choices because of family reasons and all. So this segment is basically, or this gig economy is enabling them to be into their mainstream work at their choice, doing what they like to do and also earning decently. So their contribution to the economy is going to be the way it is envisaged. Yes, work would be available at their doorstep at their choice. That's how I see it personally.
I think just to add on to what Rakesh said, I again go back, like gig is a form of labor architecture. It's not a job role. So every job role contributes in the way. I think gig allows more people to participate in their respective job roles.
Hi, I'm Nidisha. I'm from Acumen, an early stage impact investment organization. So India has one of the lowest women labor force participation rates in the world, like comparable only to, maybe some Middle Eastern countries. And for the large part, outside of the feminized sectors such as beauty, tailoring, etc., I think the gig platforms and solutions and companies have left women behind. I'm just curious about like how the entrepreneurs, other than Videt maybe, are kind of thinking about this. Have you seen any kind of demand from women workers, and how do you think about it in your own business models?
Yeah. Videt was out for this question, but maybe Madhav, can you address this? Because
Yeah, so in the delivery space, there's a structural issue in that the job itself is fairly unsafe. And hence women prefer not to do that role. But we are seeing platforms now design special rules to help women work in these types of roles. So for example, if they're working as delivery workers, radiuses will be limited, or they will not be expected to work night shifts. They're also now coming up with what they're calling pink dark stores. So dark stores that are staffed with all women so that they're safer, etc. So they definitely want more and more women to enter the workforce. It's just that there are structural issues that will need to be solved for to make these jobs viable.
I'm actually very tempted to
Okay.
take it in a very different context, though. There are two emerging sectors which might not be very obvious, but we've always thought of tailoring or all the tailoring manufacturing companies to be employing. Like Tirupur was a big hub for women employment. The OEM and the semiconductor boom, and it's massive. In the next 2-3 years, I'm talking as big a workforce as the IT workforce in India is going to be 60-70% dominated by women, because the kind of delicate work that it requires, the demand for women workforce there is big, although it's not gig in the more precise way. And the second segment that we are doing, and there we are leading right now in the country, we're training 500,000 creators every single month. 75 to 80% of them are women, and that's pure gig work. So I think there are I feel in the next 3-4 years you'll see remarkable movement in women workforce participation. At least my business depends on it, but very optimistic also, right?
Yes, perfect. On that note, I think we need to end the panel. The time's been up. I have been given enough signals, but thank you very much. I think with the takeaway is gig is here to stay. Let's embrace it. Let's build it in a way that it can actually be sustainable and durable. And yes, no man, no woman gets left behind. Gig will embrace all of us. So thank you. Thank you so much, all.